Right, so conference season has begun once again, and we're starting in Manchester with the Tories in a show of just how badly they are crumbling as a party, with the vast majority of seats empty and Tory speakers literally echoing in their empty halls, such as the dearth of support for Rishi Sunak, our unelected, mandateless PM. The whole affair looks more like a wake than a conference, but it isn't just the Tory party membership who, like us, didn't get a say in electing the current Prime Minister that are, but members of his own party are too. Some literally drawing up their own manifestos right now before an election has even been called, and much of it is absolutely crackers. Sunak has only been holding on to his position and his power for so long by acquiescing to the whims of those with the loudest voices on his back benches, those seeking to strong-arm him into their favoured positions, and in his weakness and his desperation to remain in post, he's gone along with all of that. But ultimately it hasn't worked, because for a party that has always been united by its sense of mutual greed, the reason it has survived for so long, its continued drift towards the right-wing extremes has meant cracks in even that have started to show. Although it's much too early to consider this the end of the Conservative Party, as much as I'd love to live long enough to see that, they could implode completely yet, with a devastatingly bad general election result on the cards being the end result. Right, so Rishi Sunak is in a whole world of trouble, and having come into the role of Prime Minister mere weeks after last year's Tory Party Conference, it means he's had a near year-long stint as PM before facing his own conference and his own membership. And well, the hall speaks for itself, doesn't it? It's pretty darned empty in there. In fact, they've been encouraging people down to the front so that when the BBC pans across, it can dutifully give the impression of a much fuller hall, but it really isn't. I can't remember ever seeing keynote speeches with so few people in attendance, and you can't help but wonder how much of that is down to the fact they didn't get to pick the person now running the party, or more to the point, ruining it. I say ruin it, it's the Tories. It's pretty much a ruin anyway, isn't it? A place where hope goes to die, where aspiration is killed off, and where those with more money than you support pledges, positions and promises to make your life harder as a means to win power. All aided and abetted by our mass media, of course. It's just as bad when people are polled too, though. According to Opinion, poll that's just come out, fully 34% of Tory voters are taking their votes elsewhere now. That's over a third of them. And in worse news, that figure rises to 39 to 40% in the Midlands and the south of England. The Tory shires, the Blue Wall, the Heartlands. And for those of us who kept an eye on local election results earlier this year and noted the big gains being made in those areas by the likes of the Lib Dems and the Green Party, it's little surprise to see where many of those Tory votes are going. And as much as it's true that locals are not a good analogy for where votes go in a general election, they don't look to be returning to the Tories wherever the votes end up. In worse news for Rishi Sunak, though, it's abundantly clear that his own MPs have very different ideas about what is required to win the next general election, with at least two different factions demanding he does things their way. For those with a passing familiarity with Tory factions, the best known is probably the ERG, the European Research Group, the batshit hard-right Eurosceptics who just have the feeling they'll have launched something, but actually no, it's not them. They haven't. They might do still, but it's not them at the moment, although some of their number have joined with other factions in order to push a rival manifesto forward. The less well-known New Conservatives, a contradiction in terms given the party viewpoint remains stuck in the Victorian era, has welcomed some ERG support, amongst others, for their alternative vision, led as they are by Great British Bake-Off bun merchant Prue Leith's son, Danny Kruger. Well, they're launching their manifesto today, signed up to by Jacob Rees-Mogg, Preeti Patel, Ian Duncan Smith, Miriam Cates, John Redwood, and more, to 5 policy pledges that they believe will win them the next election, which are to scrap the European Convention on Human Rights and draw up their own Bill of Rights. Yes, that old chestnut again. To cut taxes, which obviously you knew it was going to come somewhere, which have to be paid for, but you can't convince this lot Liz Truss was ever wrong. Halve the number of immigration visas given out to migrant workers, foreign students and their families, cutting our noses off to spite our faces when there's a massive work shortage in key sectors and industries that we've always been reliant on for foreign work. To stop A-level students who fail from going on to university by blocking access to student loans to them and making them do apprenticeships instead. So we're back to grammar school style school of thought and two-tier education. And they also want to ban gender ideology in schools too, because free speech and freedom of expression is banned, presumably unless it's their right to say and do whatever they like. Absolutely mad, completely backwards looking, will appeal to frothy-mouthed, gammon-complexioned types, but even they are thin on the ground. Look at the sparsity of those seats. The other manifesto, also looking to drop today, is coming from the Northern Research Group of Tory MPs, the Red Wall seat types, which is chaired by Jake Berry, who also interestingly signed the New Conservatives manifesto, so perhaps he needs help making up his mind. But given this is all about splits and dividing opinion, wrecking the Tory party, he's hardly going to be alone in that. This lot are all about a better deal for Northern seats, though, and they count the likes of Esther McVeigh and David Mundell amongst their members. And they are apparently bringing forward 8 demands of Rishi Sunak. Not all published at time of writing, though, and some of these almost sound sensible, which is slightly scary for a rotten lefty like me to admit. But they want 500,000 new houses built, clearly needed, all over the country, so no argument there, except they should, of course, be social housing, but that won't for one moment be what they are calling for. They want an east-west rail line linking Liverpool to Hull. Good idea as well, I think. Devolution of taxation to the north, though, which of course they'll want less of anyway. So why do you want that as long as it goes down, right? You just want tax cuts. That is Tory ideology, yes? Unless you're going to be honest about the need for higher taxes, perhaps. And that taxation controls inflation. But if you get given the keys to taxation in the north, who ends up paying more tax to offset the next time you lot in power screw up the economy? You're going to disproportionately have to overtax the south? Well, that'll hit your own blue wall. That'll go down well, won't it? Of course, if you listen to Rishi Sunak himself, you'd be forgiven for thinking inflation is a tax. Is what he literally said to Laura Kuenssberg, sadly, back in her post this morning on her BBC show. And even she couldn't let that one slide when taxation is literally a brake on inflation. I suppose for the easily led members of society, it's quite the wheeze if you can rebrand something that isn't a tax as a tax, and then when you cut it, you can say you cut taxes, even when you literally haven't. It's all about as honest as Sunak's 7 bin speech, though, so it's more of what we can come to expect from him. Bigger and bigger lies, apparently. No wonder he's in so much trouble. Inflation is the rate at which costs rise and fall, not in and of itself a direct cost. The man lies like a rug, and I like to save that phrase for Keir Starmer, so I'm somewhat irked I've had to roll it out here. I'll wear it out before long. Any other idioms for liar you can think of, do let me know. I'll cheerfully steal them. Above all else, though, what is uniting all these disparate factions, it would seem, though, is that desire for tax cuts. And Jeremy Hunt is feeling the pain of having to see some way through for those, to allow somewhere, even though he can't afford them. So he's apparently planning yet another raid on social security to pay for them. Austerity is back, folks. Kick the poorest, kick the ones on benefits, even if they're in work, to give the richest more. 100,000 more people are moving into state support and leaving work, which apparently proves the system isn't working. Not that, the way the country's being run is making people more and more ill. It's cuts literally driving that. You cut wages and people have to tighten their belts. We've seen rent rises, leaving people with less money and more costs, so they're spending less, knocking on to the rest of the economy. We've seen the high street shops that have been collapsing, chains collapsing. It's part of the knock-on effect. Because if people have less to spend, they stop spending, and the economy takes a hit because money isn't moving around and working to grow the economy. That's how the economy grows. With a slowing economy, as the Tories have presided over, with having to print more money to pay for stuff despite the tax take having fallen, the national debt has risen, and the Tories' answer to that was to cut a bit more. And so people have less money again, and more shops and services close. The national debt keeps rising, and so does the benefit bill then, as more people find their work no longer pays enough to live on. The Tories' answer is to keep on cutting, though, and on it goes until the national debt ended up doubling and economic growth completely slumped, and it's where we are today. It's almost as if investment in people is financially sensible and will grow the economy, and taxing the right people properly is the answer to getting the national debt back down to where it should be. But no! Still they want to cut taxes, which means cuts to spending, and all the damage my explanation here shows. It's no wonder the halls are empty, when people are sick and tired of the same things being said as the answer to the same problems that never, ever, ever end up getting fixed. The Tory party are at each other's throats as warring factions, but at the end of the day, they all still basically stand for the same thing. They cannot countenance another ideology deviating away from that. It's now all about who is in charge, who has got the power. And despite all of them being fed up with Sunak, as rival manifestos show, utterly undermining him to nobody's surprise at all, equally none of them can come up with a replacement either, as talentless as they all are. Everyone they pick has been failing. It'd be hilarious and so enjoyable if it wasn't for the fact Keir Starmer is waiting in the wings to take over, who will do exactly the same thing they are doing. How bad do you think things are for the Tories based on what you might have seen or heard so far, though? Are they facing extinction at last, or will there be some kind of saviour from somewhere? Are you just enjoying how embarrassing this all is for Sunak and co. Do let me know in the comments below. Have your say on this and be part of the conversation. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content up daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where that 7-bin speech of Rishi Sunak really did show the lengths he'll go to take you all for fools. And I'll hopefully see you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.